Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the annual Texas Southern University Communication Week. I'd like to take this opportunity to really appreciate the great work the committee, the Comm Week 2021 has done, led by our chairperson, Professor Kimberly Mitchell, and co-chair, Professor Lando. And we're really been enjoying the presentations. It's been growing very, very well. So we're excited about it. Today, we'd like to join the group. We just had a formidable presentation from our former alum, Camille Marshall, and it's been quite informative, talking about working in the establishment. But today, we're talking about online digital news platforms, the present or the future of access and representation. So this is a very important topic for many reasons. One, and by way of introduction, an online digital news platform is the online version of a newspaper, either as a standalone publication or as the online version of printed periodical. By extension, a streaming broadcasting channel and going online created more opportunities for newspapers, radio, television, such as competing with broadcast journalism in presenting breaking news in a more timely fashion. So that's basically what is understood as about. So in terms of the history of the issue of access to media and information, and more importantly, representation, before the advent of digital media platforms, access to the media information was vastly restricted to whom you are and the social economic structure. Now, news production and dissemination was dominated by the traditional mainstream medias like ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and of course the cable broadcasting channels. The problem is that underrepresented groups and African Americans and other groups within society were hardly represented in both the newsroom and the boardroom in these organizations, right? So lack of representation limits diversity in both the content of the news itself and the demographics of the reporters and other content producers. So we would like to understand this issue using some important theoretical framework that will give us a good understanding of what is going on. Now, I would like to use one of the more popular, theories called game theory. The game theory is a fable. It's a fable that is vastly used in the military, war theaters, in the business community. It is based on the notion of the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma talks about, imagine two co-conspirators in a crime. And one of them decided to give evidence about their co-conspirator to the investigator. The result is that his co-conspirator will receive a harsher sentence while he really gets a reduced sentence. Inversely, if his co-conspirator does the same to the investigator, and it's more likely that his co-conspirators will also get a harsher sentence and he will go through. But imagine if both, conspirators decide not to provide any evidence to the investigator. The investigator will be left with no evidence to prosecute the case, and it will result in a minor sentence. Now, who benefits if, as a co-conspirator, you provide the evidence to the investigator while your co-conspirator receive a higher sentence? Your self-interest is, fulfilled while the other person is prosecuted. Now, take that, by extension to look at the status of digital media platforms today. The digital media platforms capture enormous value by monetizing time and attention we spend on them and the data we generate. Now, if you're using the whole idea of the game theory, you say there are good reasons to think that digital media platforms bring significant value for news and content producers but it's hard to determine how much. If easy access to news provide people with news that they will otherwise not have gotten, then the digital media platforms are creating value overall, and some of that value will benefit the content producers. But a news provider can't easily substitute Facebook or for Twitter or Google for Bing because the alternative have much smaller audience. So the news provider have a lot to lose. They have less power in the negotiation, and they have to depend on these huge media platforms in order to, to succeed. So that's a typical, scenario that we find ourselves. So today, Google, for example, and Facebook dominate the news ecosystem without creating content themselves. Now, we generate value when we use those platforms, but the quality of the news and the information we get, depending on how much that value ultimately goes to journalists, newsrooms who produce the content in the first place. So if very little value goes to the content provider, they will have little incentive to want to develop high quality content or even want to continue producing content. So this is the classical prisoner's dilemma outcome where we all are worse off. Alternatively, if digital platforms pass a lot of the value to the content producers or the providers, we will all benefit from both high quality content and ease of access. So using this scenario of the game theory to understand that the majority will benefit if they are not driven by self-centeredness, if they think about sharing the value of content creation and dissemination among all participants in the ecosystem, then of course everybody will be better off in that place. So based on that, my colleague, Professor Anthony Ogbo, is going to give you a different perspective from the point of the entrepreneur, how you go about starting your own digital media platform in this vast landscape that is filled with competition and all the major players like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and the rest, and how you can even succeed without that. Because we have the interest of our students who are in class learning the skills necessary to eventually either when they leave school to work for a corporation or to start a business themselves. So at this stage, I will hand over to my colleague, Dr. Anthony Ogbo. Dr. Ogbo, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ulasi, for that theoretical framework. And I'm glad you mentioned starting your own business, because most of the students I encounter, most of them will always tell me about their passion, to start a business as soon as they leave school. In order not to spend a lot of time introducing myself, I'll just tell you one or two things about me, the specific areas about my profession that is relevant to this moment. I started my media business 23 years ago, and this was 17 years after I got into the business, working for other major media organizations. Now in Nigeria, I worked with the Daily Star, Weekly Trumpet, The Guardian, the Prime publications, and when I ended up in Houston, I started with the Houston Chronicle, then worked with McCann and Erickson, one of the top advertising companies, and then ended up in Houston Sun. Then after Houston Sun, I decided it was time to start my own publication. And basically 23 years now, The Guardian has been on the street. And also September this year, just to let you know, I'll be celebrating my 40 years non-stop anniversary in the media confraternity, predominantly print. So I'm sharing this because taking time after I left school allowed me to be able to be well prepared before I could start my own business. It gave me all the skills that I needed. So I was confident when I was getting into business. I just want to share that with the audience, especially some of my students. I will go ahead and share the screen and then start off with the presentation. So give me one moment. Okay, I hope the screen is well situated.
Yeah, we can see it.
Good. So I started with The Guardian. I started The Guardian from my house. These are actually some of my recent cover publications. I started this business from my house, converted my study room to the newsroom, and created another ringtone on my phone to serve as my office phone. I wrote, I edited, I reported, I marketed, I did sales. I also delivered my publication. And I did this up until the publication started making money to start hiring. That was in 1998. Today, more than 22 years after, The Guardian is still on the Houston streets. Now, back to the digital era. Last year, that was January 2020, myself and Dr. Ulasi set up a multimedia company, the Pilot Media Incorporated, publishing the Pilot News and also facilitating the Pilot TV. Now, in 1 year after this publication setup was able to, especially the news part of it, was able to generate 500,000 followership on Facebook. And then we were able to also penetrate governments and other organizations relevant, to sharing news and topical news and facilitating news events. So that is just to share the relevance of digital technology.
The slide is not moving.
Oh, let's see. It's not moving?
Not from our side.
It's still not moving?
No, sir.
Let's see.
Professor Randall, can you move a share from your side?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please do.
Dr. Ogbo, can you stop
sharing?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Great. Next. We talked about The Guardian. So next. Next, please. Great. So I was talking about the pilot, and I've already talked about the pilot, but the good news about the pilot is that we were able to take advantage of the digital media resources. So let's come to the statement of my purpose of this event. This presentation is two-phase folded, unraveling the real-world realities of access and representation in the online news delivery standards. First of all, I'm going to discuss the past, update you with the present, and then alert you about the future. Then I will offer substantial tips to empower you in making that leap of faith from classroom to entrepreneurship. Next, please. Now, in the past, revenue generation was a tug of war. I'm talking about a couple of years ago. We used audit companies to justify readership and circulation. And trust me, that did not go on well with the minority publications because we are always underrepresented. Now, on the production process, it was more of labor intensive because the gadgets were too manual and the management style was too scientific. In fact, there was this position called copy chaser position. It's some office assistants that run copies from office to office, from newsroom to the production room. And we were doing that because there was no network. Computer network did not exist at that time. So that's how difficult it was in the newsroom production process. And then the same thing with the newsroom management. It was a lot of screaming because it's fast-paced and so chaotic. Now, administration, what we now call HR, is called administration. And there we are more focused on the brand and profit, rather than reporters or journalists that were doing the job. So that was, if you look at the screen and see some of the photos on the screen, some of you were not even born when we used those, but that's how we handled media in a couple of years. Next slide, please. So now we are in the era of what we call the digital freedom, that online technology access, how the online technology access have grown rapidly for all Americans, including those who are less privileged. Now, Google is free. Most other platforms have free apps that we use to, develop our media projects. And then freedom also to express ourselves. I remember in those days to send a letter to the editor. You will send that letter, and out of about 100 letters to the editor, 50% of them got published. And sometimes those mainstream media publish those letters based on ethnicity. And now we have that freedom that we can express ourselves, write our stories, tell our stories our own way. Next slide, please. So back to the statistics. Because technology is cheap, affordable, does not mean that the online digital venture is bound to be successful. So let's take a look at those statistics and see where we are. Now look at this. A large majority of Americans get their news from digital devices. 60% regularly and 26% sometimes. Well, that's good news. At least we know where and how to channel our resources when we are starting business. And then look at the television. It's down to 40% regularly and 28% sometimes. And look at the radio. And then when you look at the print publications, you see that it is it's still going down to 10% regularly and then 22% sometimes. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, that's another revelation about the trend in digital media, our access to digital media, that half of Americans say they prefer a digital platform. Now, 52% of Americans say they prefer a digital platform, against 35 for television, 7 for radio, and then 5 for print publication. Now, since we are watching, are we seeing something regarding the print publication and radio, and then TV is somehow going down? All the 3 concepts, all the 3 areas giving way for the digital platform. Now we can analyze that. Next slide, please. Now that's another revelation, that 2/3 of US adults get news from websites or apps. Now, if you look at it, out of that 2/3, 34% regularly, 35% sometimes. And then what about the search engine? 23% regularly, and 41% sometimes. Then down to the social media, which means less Americans are looking through social media to get their news. But then by the time we go further, we can see the age disparities. Now the podcast, 6% regularly, and then 16% sometimes. Next slide, please. So the reality, those under 50 turn more frequently to digital devices for news, those under 50. And then look at the ages 18 to 29. These are very recent research carried out between August 31st to September 7, 2020. Look at the 18 to 29 years, 71%. And then 71% on digital media devices. And then go down to 30 to 49 years of age. You have 67% turning over to digital devices. But then if you go up to 65 years older, you see a change that 68% of them still get their news from the television, 48% from smartphones and computers and tablets, those digital devices, and then 21% of them on radio. Now, print media, well, they are right, because these days it's old folks that read our papers. Now, 25%, still rely on print. So that's at least a little bit good news for print publishers. Next slide, please. Now, this is still similar. For Americans ages 18 to 29, the most commonly digital way they get their news is social media. And no wonder we're all on Facebook. Now look at 18 to 29 years old, 42%. 42%, and then go down, or rather go up to 65 years and older on the social media, 10%. 10% on the social media. But then if you look at the traditional media websites, 32% of the older folks, 65 older, still get their news from news websites and applications. And then come to 18 to 29, it goes down to 28%. So that still shows you how age, or rather the age, different age groups affect the way we adopt technology. Next slide, please. Yeah, but then why did I just share these statistics? Those figures are necessary because they tell us how to structure our prospective media ventures, how to design our audiences, how to brand our soon-to-be media companies, be it newspaper, radio, TV, or film. Now, the last statistics I'm going to share now is the digital divide, because this has been a little bit controversial. Now, because technology is available, doesn't mean that there is no divide in technology adoption. A digital divide persists even as lower income Americans make gains in technology adoption. Let's look at that statistics. Next slide, please. This, we have to listen, we have to look at this very critically, that 3 in 10 adults with household income below $30,000 a year, which is 29% of the population, don't own a smartphone. Now, I don't want to cry, but look at the second one. More than 4 in 10 Americans don't have home broadband services. That's 44% population, or even a traditional computer, 46%. So sometimes there are professors, when we see some of our students do our essays on smartphone, don't yell at them. Just ask them questions about, what kind of technology do you have? And the majority of low-income Americans are not tablet owners. Now, this piece of information is what we really have to still work on in terms of who we serve as students, because that's a little bit concerning. Let's go to the next slide. And even there, we should also just know that it is evident that there is a correlation between technology access and social economic status. Now, this is also necessary to help us make informed decisions toward our prospects as media entrepreneurs. Now, a leap of faith. This is the meat of this presentation. This is the meat of this presentation. This is the core mission of this presentation. So before you make that leap, calm down, take a deep breath, because I'm going to give you tips. I'm going to give you major tips towards your transition from the classroom to the fraternity of media ownership and managers. I'm going to give you substantial feedback. Just like I said, I know that we are all can't wait to graduate so that we can jump into the market. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to be prepared to do that. And when you are prepared, trust me, the chances of success is way more. So let's have the next slide, please. This illustrates the leap of faith. It's a flow chart illustrating how, first of all, we have to conceive our business. Then, after we conceive our business, we have to analyze our strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And that's the meaning of SWOT. We have to analyze that. And then the third step is that we have to facilitate our audience research to know what type of media business we want to do and who we aspire to serve. Then that takes us to branding and marketing. Branding is not just making up the business and throwing it out in the market. Now you have to brand your business in such a way to ease your marketing activities. I'm going to explain this more in the next slide. And then when you get 1, 2, 3, 4 in place, then the revenue will be out there staring at you. You just have to strategize to know how to do business. Let's get the next slide, please. So, these are the tips. Number 1, business conception. Please do not choose any name for business. Maybe because it's your favorite daughter's name or is your favorite, childhood name. Any name is good, but make sure it aligns with your mission, vision, and objectives. And I'm going to tell you just one little story about The Guardian. When I started The Guardian in Houston, I called it International Guardian. First blunder, I was listed under Yellow Page. In Yellow Page, I was listed under insurance companies. That's number 1 blunder. It's not over. Black Business Directory listed me under churches. Guardian. Then I have all kinds of people calling me for insurance policies and folks calling me, when is the Bible class?
Dr. Ogbo, you have less than 5 minutes. Our time.
Really?
Please.
Okay, well, let me rush over them. Audience and audience research is just basically seeking the right audience and making sure that the audience also aligns with our business and the objectives. And then the branding and marketing, as I explained, you have to brand your business based on your mission, based on your market, based on your services, so that you will be able to get the right audience. Now, when you have all this in place, the money aspect will be easy to explore. Now, the next slide, please. Next slide is the SWOT matrix, which I've also explained. Build your strength, identify areas of business that are performing well. Minimize your weaknesses. Those weaknesses that could put your business at a disadvantage. Seize every given opportunities you have, whether it's grant or community support or loans, and then also identify your possible threats, not just your competitor. Your threats could be government policies, it could be location, it could be more than just competitors. And when you get all those in place, then physically you will be ready to get into the market. Now, let me close because I think my time is up. Now, listen very well. I am not an inspirational speaker. I do not belong to that school. So I don't know what they tell you, but what I do is convey market realities, not to scare you, but to get you prepared before you get into the business. We are doing this to encourage more African Americans and minorities to take advantage of the existing technologies, and go into media ventures and entrepreneurship. So while you dream of that business, or dream of your leap into the valued world of business, also think of branding yourself as an employee. Somebody has to hire you if that business cannot initially pay your bills. Somebody has to hire you. Okay? I teach a course in media marketing and media management and marketing, and part of what I do in this class is to prepare students for those challenges. And feel free anytime to ask questions or get in touch with me regarding this mission. So thank you very much, and I'll be glad to take questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ogbo. You all heard we provided you some kind of a framework to analyze the problem and issues. We don't have much time, but let's see if we have some questions, and we'll be glad to answer it before the next group comes up. So basically, the point is that as a student going through your academic work, your main goal and aspiration is to finish school and eventually secure a job, have a family, and of course advance. But one thing that is so clear in it, especially when it comes to media access and representation, is that if you don't have access to the media, you will not be able to tell your story. And there's no guarantee that if somebody tells your story, that they will flatter you. So the key is that you must equip yourself with the necessary skill sets, the necessary training, and the knowledge necessary for you to become either a budding entrepreneur, like a content producer, a website developer, a filmmaker, a journalism professional. These are all areas in our field that most students like to get into. But the key is that you need the necessary tool to prepare yourself. So we, as minorities, groups within underrepresented group, key to access and diversity is very important, both in the newsroom, the boardroom, and also in terms of those who produce content and also distribute it. So that's why this is important. All right. Do we have any question? We have less than 2 minutes. Yeah, Dr. Ogbo, you were telling about how initially you branded The Guardian as an international guardian, only to find yourself in Green Pages. Could you just...
Yeah, they listed me differently.
Yeah.
So the remedy was that I had to change my name from International Guardian to International Guardian News. You see, now I tied my business to my services and to my product, and the calls stopped coming. Nobody calls me anymore to ask me about insurance policy. Rather, they call me to ask me, what kind of paper are you? So that's the point. That's actually what I was going to share.
Maybe the linkage with International Guardian. People, when you hear about Guardian, of course, you think about protection, right? So maybe there's insurance, or maybe something from above.
Exactly.
So maybe that's how you found it. So the key is that your name and eventually how you brand your business has to be in line with your audience, and make sure that it's not confusing, that people will understand, what exactly that is that you do. So for somebody in the media, it's important to include news or entertainment or broadcasting, because these are areas that will make sure that people understand that what you're doing. Yeah. Any more? Do you want to share any more closing comments before we close? We have less than a minute.
No, it's fortunately I've already delivered.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've already delivered my closing comments. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath before you jump.
All right. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for listening. And we hope we have made sense in this presentation and that the basic statistics that is out there doesn't lie. Minorities and underrepresented groups are completely underrepresented in boardrooms and content creators. So it's up to us to make those changes happen. One way to make those changes is either going to business content creators, publishers, and also, we're not saying that you shouldn't look for a job elsewhere, but the only way to guarantee such access is to make sure that you're part of that, ecosystem that both produces and also disseminate information. So we thank you very much for joining in this call. Thanks.